Sign it before dessert, or I swear my son will have his marriage annulled by Monday morning. My mother-in-law's voice was calm. That was the thing about Margaret Holloway. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Have you ever sat at a table, smiling, while the people across from you were actively trying to strip you of everything you'd built? Because that's exactly where I was on Thanksgiving, staring down a 14-page document that promised to gut my entire life. And let me tell you, what happened next was not on their menu. You see, this wasn't just any document. It was a post-nuptial agreement, meticulously crafted by the most expensive family law attorney in Connecticut. Printed on heavy creamstock, the kind of paper that costs more than most people's lunch, it sat there, a pen laid beside it like silverware, daring me to sign away every single marital asset if Daniel and I ever divorced. And across from me, my husband, Daniel. He was practically vibrating with tension. His gaze fixed on his wine glass as if it held all the answers, desperate to become invisible. He hadn't met my eyes since we'd pulled through those iron gates 2 hours earlier. His father, Howard, carved his turkey with a slow, precise smugness, the movements of a man who had already won. His sister, Victoria, did that thing she always did, performing theatrical indifference, meticulously examining her manicure while her husband, Preston, quietly refilled his glass and watched me like a car crash about to happen. This was Thanksgiving at the Holloways. This was my life now, 3 years after marrying Daniel. Naive enough at 28 to believe love was some kind of bulletproof armor. And before I tell you exactly what I put on that table instead of my signature, and why 20 minutes later 2 black SUVs were blocking their driveway, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because this isn't just a story about a family dinner gone wrong. This is about what happens when the people who underestimated you the most end up staring straight into the thing they never saw coming. Have you ever had to sit at a table full of people who smiled at you while planning your destruction? If you have, then stay with me, because tonight we're not just eating turkey. Margaret, Daniel's mother, finally folded her hands on the tablecloth. Her eyes met mine, holding that particular expression she reserved for things that disappointed her. Contractors, caterers who messed up portion sizes, and me. "Claire," she said, making my name sound like a minor inconvenience, like a buzzing fly. "You're a smart girl. I've always said that. Smart enough to understand what this family represents. The Holloway name opens doors most people spend entire lifetimes just standing outside of. What we're asking isn't unreasonable. It's simply a formality. A formality." I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Howard set down his fork, his voice booming slightly. "Daniel's grandfather built this family from nothing. We protect what was built. That's not personal." "It feels a little personal," I shot back, my voice dangerously calm. Victoria finally looked up from her nails. She smiled, that specific, saccharine smile she'd perfected since the day Daniel first introduced us. The one that said she found me amusing like a child's clumsy drawing, with just a hint of affectionate condescension. "No one is attacking you, Claire. We just think that, given your background, it's reasonable to have certain protections in place. You came into this family with nothing. We'd simply like clarity on what leaves with you if things don't work out." Your background. Those 2 words had been following me around that house for 3 years like a shadow. Your background. Meaning the tiny apartment in Akron where I grew up. Your background. Meaning my mother working double shifts at a grocery store, my father gone since I was 4. Your background. Meaning I hadn't been born into a family with a name that opened doors so clearly, I must have married one to get through them. They never actually asked what I did. Not with any real, genuine curiosity. Daniel had mentioned early on that I ran a small software company, and Margaret had nodded, the way you nod when someone tells you they've taken up watercolor painting. Polite. Dismissive. The topic never, ever came up again. To the Holloways, I was just a pretty girl from nowhere who'd charmed their son into a wedding, now statistically likely to take half his trust fund if the marriage dissolved. They weren't entirely wrong about being strategic. They were just wrong about which one of us was playing chess. I took a deep breath. "I'm not signing it." The table went absolutely still. Daniel finally looked up. His face was a tangled mess. Part guilt, part warning, part something I recognized as the look of a man who knows he's made a series of terrible decisions and is now watching them compound in real time. "Claire," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not signing it," I repeated, even calmer this time. The exact same calm Margaret used. I'd been practicing it. Howard leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Then I want you to understand what that means. I have a call scheduled with our attorney at 9 tomorrow morning. We begin the annulment process on grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. You represented yourself to our family as a woman of modest means who loved our son. If it turns out there were material misrepresentations about your circumstances or intentions, the marriage can be unwound." Fraudulent misrepresentation. I let the words hang in the air. "That's an interesting choice of words," I said. Preston cleared his throat. He was their enforcer, the one they used when they wanted to deliver bad news disguised as reasonableness. He'd gone to Yale Law, which he mentioned the way other people mention their eye color, as context, as basic fact. "Claire, we've done our due diligence. We know your company's last filed revenue. We know what it is. $48,000 last year." He paused, a smirk playing on his lips. "We're not here to humiliate you. We're here to protect the family." I looked at Preston. "Yale Law." Yes, I knew that. I also knew he'd been using Holloway family money to fund a private investment account he hadn't disclosed to Victoria. An account holding a significant position in a pharmaceutical company currently under SEC investigation. And I knew he'd received that tip from a contact at their accounting firm, which, as of 31 days ago, was a subsidiary of a company I owned. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. 48,000. I asked, my voice flat. "That's what the filing showed," Preston said, the satisfaction radiating off him like heat. "Pull out your phones," I said, "and search our systems." Nobody moved. "Please," I said, the word so precise, so controlled, that Victoria actually reached for her phone before catching herself. "Claire," Margaret began, her voice a warning. "Wheeler Systems," I repeated. V-E-L-A-R. "It's fine. I'll wait." Daniel's face had utterly transformed. He was looking at me the way he used to look at me in the beginning, before the Holloways had slowly, patiently, worked on him like a current wearing down a stone. With wonder. Like he'd just remembered something about me that the last 3 years had caused him to forget. He picked up his phone. He typed. I watched him read. I watched the color drain from his face. "What is?" he started, then stopped. Howard frowned at his son, then picked up his own phone. Margaret, looking supremely annoyed, stared at her husband with the expression of a woman who has never needed to look anything up in her life, and resented the implication that she should start now. Victoria typed something, her fingers flying, then went completely still. Preston's jaw tightened. His casual smirk replaced by something resembling fear. Wheeler Systems. It wasn't the name on my business cards. It wasn't the name I used in public. It was the parent company, the entity sitting above the entities sitting above the entities that touched the things people could actually see. I had structured it that way deliberately. Not to hide, but because when you build something real, you don't need it to be legible to people who aren't looking. The last public valuation of Wheeler Systems, reported in the Wall Street Journal just 14 months ago, was $2.1 billion. The Holloways' total family net worth, including the sprawling estate we were sitting in and all of Howard's commercial real estate holdings, approximately $400 million. I knew this because I had read their financial disclosures during the due diligence process before I allowed one of my subsidiaries to extend them a line of commercial credit 2 years ago. They didn't know the credit had come from me. They knew the name of the bank. They didn't know who owned it. "This isn't," Howard started. "Possible," I offered, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "You've been running this company since before you married Daniel?" Margaret asked, her voice unchanged. I respected that about her, even now. She was a woman who did not allow herself the luxury of visible shock. "I founded Wheeler when I was 24, I said. The 48,000 Preston mentioned belongs to a shell entity I used for administrative purposes. It has nothing to do with the operating company. I picked up the post-nuptial agreement. Held it for a moment. I understand why you had this drawn up. You thought you were protecting your family. You thought I was someone who had something to gain and nothing to offer. You thought the math was simple. How? Daniel whispered. It wasn't quite a question. It was the sound of a person's entire model of reality cracking. I didn't lie to you, I said, and I meant it. I had told Daniel I had a company. I had told him it was growing. I had even told him on our third date, sitting on the floor of my apartment eating takeout because I hadn't yet bought a couch, that I was going to build something that lasted. He had laughed gently, not cruelly, and said that was very ambitious of me. He had not asked follow-up questions. Neither had his family. And that was the thing about the Holloways. They looked at me and saw a category. And categories, to them, don't require investigation. So this is what, Victoria started, her voice shrill. You've been hiding this to make us look foolish? To prove some kind of point? I haven't been hiding anything, I said, calmly meeting her gaze. You never asked. A silence descended over the table, thick and heavy like an incoming storm. And then my mind drifted, the way it does when the walls of a room start to feel familiar for all the wrong reasons. I went back 3 years to a dinner almost exactly like this one, just 2 weeks after Daniel and I got engaged. A welcome dinner, Margaret had called it. I'd worn a dress I couldn't really afford, desperate to make a good impression, before I understood that the impression had already been made and adjudicated, long before I walked through the door. After dinner, while Daniel was in another room with his father, Margaret had pulled me aside into the room she called the library. She sat across from me in a high-backed wing chair, and in that same quiet, controlled voice she'd said, I want to be honest with you because I think honesty is a form of respect. Daniel is generous. He always has been. He loves easily and he trusts easily, and those are beautiful qualities in a person. But they are also vulnerabilities. I need you to understand that this family will always protect itself. Whatever your intentions are. And I'll take you at your word that they're sincere. I need you to know that we are watching. I had left that room and sat in my car for 10 minutes before forcing myself to go back inside. I'd thought about my mother, who had never once in my entire life said anything like that to any person I brought home. My mother, who offered coffee and asked questions and was simply grateful for whoever made me smile. I thought about the 7 employees I had at the time, who trusted me to make payroll, who didn't know yet that what we were building was something they would still be talking about in 20 years. I thought about the girl I had been at 21, sitting in a computer lab at 3 in the morning, running the same simulation for the 14th time, absolutely certain she was onto something, and absolutely terrified she was wrong. I thought, they will not break this. Not this. Whatever else they take from me, they cannot have this. I came back to the table now, to the silence, to Margaret's face. It was doing something I had never seen it do before. Working. Visibly working. An expression of someone rapidly updating a mental spreadsheet. Well, she finally said. There's something else, I said. And here's where I need to be honest with you. Because looking back, I can see that what I did next was not entirely clean. It wasn't the behavior of someone who had simply risen above it. It was the behavior of someone who had been carefully, deliberately patient for 3 years, and had finally decided that patience had reached its expiration date. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. I set it on the table next to the post-nuptial agreement. 18 months ago, I said, my voice low and steady, your family took out a commercial credit line of $12 million to refinance 3 of the Holloway Group properties. The lending institution was Meridian Capital Partners. I looked at Howard. His eyes were wide. In November of last year, I acquired a controlling interest in Meridian Capital, which means, as of that acquisition, I hold the note on your credit line. I opened the folder and slid a single document across the table. The line is in technical default as of 30 days ago. The balloon payment due in December was missed. Not by much, but missed. Howard started to stand up, his face ashen. "Sit down, Howard," I said. And the surprise of hearing it said that way, quiet, final, made him hesitate just long enough that he actually sat back down. "You can't," he spluttered. "I'm not calling it," I interrupted. "I want to be very clear about that. I have no interest in destabilizing the Holloway properties. I have no interest in your business. What I have is documentation. And what I want is for everyone at this table to understand what the actual math looks like." I looked at Preston. "Since we're doing due diligence." He was utterly still. "The account you've been running through Trident Advisory," I said, turning to face him directly, "received material non-public information about Pelios Pharma's FDA filing timeline. The source of that information was a contact at Strickland Financial. Strickland was acquired by a Wheeler subsidiary in September. Their internal communications are now subject to our compliance review." I let that sink in. The air thickened. I forwarded the relevant files to the SEC's whistleblower division 6 days ago. Victoria turned slowly to look at her husband, her face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. Preston opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I want to be clear," I said to the table, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces, "that I did not do any of this tonight. I did not engineer this dinner. I did not arrange for any of this to coincide. You called me here. You put that document next to the cranberry sauce. You chose tonight." I closed the folder, a soft thud echoing in the sudden silence. "I just came prepared." Margaret looked at me for a long, unblinking moment. Her face was doing something I'd never seen before. Visibly, urgently working through a complex problem. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I want my husband to look at me," I said. Daniel looked up, his eyes wide and vulnerable. "I want you to understand," I said to him, "that I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this because for 3 years I have sat in this house and let your family define what I was worth to them. And I kept my mouth shut because I thought if I just waited, if I was just patient enough, it would become clear on its own. I thought you would see it. I thought they would." I looked at him steadily. "That document they put in front of me tonight, did you know about it?" He looked down, shame creeping onto his face. "Did you know about it?" "They told me it was a formality," he said quietly. "They said it was just to protect the family." "Yes," I finished for him. "I heard. Claire, I didn't think." "No," I said. "You didn't." Just then there was a sound in the driveway. Tires on gravel, then the heavy metallic thud of vehicle doors. Margaret turned towards the window. Howard pushed back his chair, his eyes darting. 2 sets of headlights were moving up the private road. "That would be the federal compliance team," I said matter-of-factly. "They're not here for dinner. I authorized a voluntary disclosure with the SEC 2 weeks ago regarding Trident. They asked me to be present for the initial interview with the relevant parties." I looked at Preston, whose face was now utterly blank with shock. "That's you. This is insane." Victoria shrieked, her voice high and tight. "You can't do this in someone's home. Preston can speak with them here, or he can come in voluntarily to their office on Monday," I said. That was the agreement. I advocated for the home option because I thought it would be less disruptive. "You're welcome." Preston just stared at the folder like it might bite him. I stood up. "I want to say something," I announced, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "And I want to say it clearly, because I think it's the most important thing that happens at this table tonight." I looked at Margaret, meeting her gaze squarely. "I don't hate you. I'm not doing this out of hatred. I'm doing this because you handed me a 14-page document and a pen and told me to sign away my rights, because you had already decided what I was. And I sat here and I let you finish your turkey, and I let you say every word you planned to say because I think if you were going to do it, you should have the chance to do it all the way. And I should have the chance to respond all the way." "You've made your point," Howard said tightly, his voice hoarse. "I've made a start," I corrected him. "The point is this. I never hid from you. You never looked. There's a difference. And the next time you sit across from someone and decide in advance what they are, I'd encourage you to ask one more question before you print 14 pages on heavy cream paper. Picked up my bag. I looked at Daniel one more time. I'll be at the Whitmore Hotel if you want to talk, I said. Genuinely talk. Not Holloway talk. Actual conversation. I'm still your wife. I'd like the chance to figure out if that means something to us, independent of all of this. But that's your decision. I buttoned my coat and walked towards the door. Behind me, I heard the sharp ring of the front doorbell. Heard Howard push his chair back. Heard Margaret say something in a low, controlled voice I didn't try to make out. Heard Victoria say Preston's name, once, sharply, like a question that already knew its answer. I didn't stop walking. Outside, the November air was clean and cold, the kind of cold that wakes you up rather than punishing you. The gravel crunched loudly under my heels. I passed the first black SUV. A man in a dark coat gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. My car was at the end of the circular driveway. I'd parked it there deliberately, facing out. I got in and started the engine, sitting for a moment with my hands on the wheel, watching the lights of the estate in the rearview mirror. The windows were bright and golden in the dark. The house, enormous and certain of itself, the way houses are when they've been in one family for generations. My phone buzzed. A text from my CFO, Rachel. All clear on the Meridian documentation. Also, the Wall Street Journal wants a comment on the Trident story timeline. I typed back, Monday, and send flowers to the team. They've had a long quarter. I thought about calling my mother. I would call her tomorrow from somewhere quiet, and she would say something that made the whole thing smaller in the best possible way. She had a gift for that, for making the enormous things manageable without diminishing them. I thought about Daniel. Thought about the first time I saw him at a conference in San Francisco before I knew who his family was. He'd spilled coffee on himself in the hotel lobby and laughed. Immediately. Genuinely, without embarrassment. And I had thought, that's a person who isn't performing. That's someone real. I still believed that was true. I believed that real person was still in there, under 3 years of Holloway gravity. Whether he could excavate it was not something I could do for him. Put the car in drive. The last thing I saw in my mirror as I pulled through the iron gates was the silhouette of the house against the dark sky, every window lit, and the long empty driveway behind me. I didn't feel triumphant the way I thought I would. I felt the way you feel at the end of a very long project. The specific exhaustion of having finished something, and the particular lightness that comes after it, a kind of stillness. That night, I didn't reclaim a seat at their table. I remembered I had never needed one. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and burning bridges? What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below.